So now I'd like to talk about a concept known in Vue as attribute binding. And attribute binding is when we bind dynamic values to HTML attributes. So say for instance we had an anchor tag. The href is an attribute. What if I wanted the value of that to be dynamic? Normally when I create a link, I'd put in a website address here. So http://www.thenetninja.co.uk. And right here I'll just say best website ever, and that would be how I create a normal link. But this is hard coded, this value. If I want it to be dynamic, I need to do something else. Now the first thing I would do is take this value and create a data property, and I've already done that. I've created this URL data property, which is thenetninja.co.uk. So what if I wanted to output that URL data property inside this href right here? Would I just say URL? Well, no, that's not going to work. That's just going to literally think that URL is the href. And if I inspect this, we can see the href is URL. So that doesn't work. Well, what about curly braces like we do in the template? Will that work? Well, again, no. The literal href is going to be curly braces URL. So in order for this value to be dynamic, we have to do something else. We have to do what's known as data or attribute binding. So the way we do this in Vue is by using a directive called v-bind, and then we use a colon and attach it to whatever attribute we want to bind data to. So this means that whatever is inside here now is dynamic. And inside here, we can now access the different properties inside our Vue component, including this URL property right here. So now I can type URL, and no longer is it just going to be literally URL. It's going to look for that value inside our component and output it right here, because we've said it's dynamic by using v-bind. So let me save that and preview. If we inspect this now, we can see over here, we get the URL property value that's defined in our Vue component. So this is how we use attribute binding. Now again, we tend to use this quite a lot in Vue projects. So instead of always having to write v-bind, we can get rid of that. And whenever we see just a colon, that means we're data binding to that attribute. So this is the same thing. It's just a shortcut for v-bind. Much like we have this @ symbol for events instead of v-on, we have colon for v-bind. And they're probably two of the main shortcuts that we use in Vue.js that are really helpful and that we use a lot. So let me just show you that this still does the same thing. Yep, still works. So we can do this with many different attributes, not just href. So let me comment this out, and you'll notice I've already created this assets folder right here, and inside this we have 3 images, 1.jpg, 2.jpg and 3.jpg, and they're each a book cover. So I want to use these for each book as we output them. So I'm going to create an image tag for each book at the top. So I'll say image, and then each one needs a source and an alt. Now the alt, we're going to bind to that, and to do that, remember, we can just use a colon, or we can say v-bind. I'm just going to use the colon, the shortcut, and I want the value to be the book title. So that is going to be the alt for the image. So let me paste that in. Now the source as well, I want this to be dynamic, but we don't have any kind of data property that we want it to be yet. So let's go over to these books, and let's also create an image property for each one. So each image property is going to be basically a path, the source, to grab one of these. So they're inside the assets folder. So let's say assets/1.jpg for the first one. Now I'm just going to copy that so I don't have to type out each one individually because I'm super lazy. So 2, and then the third one, which is going to be 3. And by the way, these images are all found on the course files GitHub repo. If you just look at the lesson 13 branch right here, and you can see the assets folder, you can download the zip folder or go to each one of these individually and save it to your computer, entirely up to you. But they're all there. But anyway, now we've created these image properties, we can now bind to the source over here by using a colon, And because they're on the book that we have right here, the image properties, we can say book.image. And therefore, the source is going to be this for the first one, this for the second one, and this for the third one. So now, when we're outputting these, we should see all of those 3 images as well, which we do. So that is data or attribute binding. And again, we are going to be using this a lot as we go through the different chapters and projects in this course.